Yo gamers, what's up? It's your boy GoldDemon 12 back with another Honkai video. Sorry for the delay in content. I'm pretty busy, but I do want to try to get more videos out, talk about the game, all that stuff. So today's video is going to be an interesting one. This game has a really big problem, and that is with teams, right? If you clicked on this video, hopefully you do enjoy. That was a little spike there. We're gonna ignore that. Uh, But this game has a serious team problem, and I think it's going to have a serious team problem going forward, unless, of course, Hoyoverse releases more characters to address this specific problem. And what is that problem? Well, there isn't enough teams. You know, some people have said it's because of the DPS characters and how they're boring, they're all the same, blah, 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 you know, this, that, whatever. I haven't seen any other videos on this. I'm just going to go off purely my thoughts here and why there's a big problem with characters in the game. So shout out to Star Wars Station for having a great resource to look at characters and stuff. They're awesome. Again, the characters and the issues with teams that I am bringing up here. So if you look at the roster of characters, we have a sizable amount of characters. Again, 4 of these characters are the MC, so if you ignore that, it's less, but you know what I'm talking about. And this is great and all if we had the characters to support the ones we like. And what I mean by that, well, let's look at something real quickly. Here's your destruction roster, right? You have 5 DPS characters. No, sorry, not 5, 6 DPS characters, right? Because that's Dan Hung, Jingliu, Blade, Clara, MC, Hook, Arlen. That's not 6. Anyways, forgive me. Math is very difficult as I am a Genshin player. But yeah, 7 destruction characters. That they're all DPS characters. Let's look at the hunt characters, okay? We have 5 hunt characters that are all DPS characters. And then we have erudition. We have 5 erudition characters that are all DPS characters. Making up a total of what, 18? No, 17? Is it 17? Math? Is mathing? It's 17. Yeah. So 17 DPS characters. That's quite a lot. That leaves the rest of the roster being abundance, preservation, nihility, and harmony. Now, granted, nihility can be both support and defense characters, right? So far, at least, with how they're designing it. This is true, right? With Kafka being, DPS, Welt being a hybrid, Pela being a, support, etc. But if we're just looking at this, right? We have 4 of them. Or sorry, let's put Welt in here. 5 of these nihility characters being DPSs, with 2 of them being supports. Okay, that's fantastic. All right, let's look at Harmony, the hot woman path. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the hot woman path, right? Not the support path. It's the hot woman path because this path only has hot women, and it will continue to be like that. I guarantee it. All right, we can bet on it. But yes, so we have 4 harmony supports here, okay? And that's it. And that's actually where the problem begins. So we're not going to get into defense characters, right? We have 4 preservation characters and then 4 abundance characters, which granted, half of them can solo sustain, which is great. The other half not solo sustain, but that's fine. I'm sure in the future we'll grow into having more dual defense comps, like Swarm does incentivize dual defense comps. Unless, of course, you have Fushuan, who can pretty much tank everything on her own. Are you doing some, like, not Remembrance, or actually, yeah, you could do Remembrance or Preservation, like Japard setup or something like that, right? And then, obviously, there's Abundance, which we have for set of healers, which, obviously, Natasha's getting pushed out of relevance, right? It's all fine and good. But the problem here is that most characters in the game, if not all DPS characters, want a hyper carry setup, right? Kafka, it's a bit different. She wants other sub DPS characters that she is going to enable them to do big damage, being Loucha, Sampo, and Gwenephen. I think that's how you say it. I'm probably butchering the name. But yeah, the reason why this is a problem is because of what I said earlier, the support characters, right? We don't have the support characters to benefit all of our DPS characters, not only equally, but just at all. Because let's look realistically here. What do we have, right? In fact, I was going to avoid it, but we're going to. GoldDemon video where he doesn't pull up Pride 1 challenge, like impossible. But I have to, just for the sake of what I'm saying for context, right? So if you look at our current DPS characters, our top DPS characters, right? That being Jingliu, Dan Heng, right? And in some cases RNG, Clara, blah blah blah, whatever. Just look at those top DPS characters. Look at the team requirements that they want, right? And we can do this for basically anybody. I can open up all of them except for Kafka, right? We look at the popular team builds. Oh, what is this? Pela, Tingyun, Yukong, a couple of Bronias in there. Awesome. Let's go to Jingliu. We go down the teams. Oh, what is this? Pela, Tingyun, Bronya. Okay, awesome. Let's go down the blade. What do we see here? Oh, we see Bronya, Silverwolf, Loucha, Pela again. Fantastic. Let's go down to Zila, alright? Let's scroll down. What do we see? Oh, we see Tingyun. We see Pela. There's a couple Astas in there. We see Bronya again, right? Silverwolf because Mono Quantum, and people are coping about that team for some unknown reason. You see what I'm getting at? We don't have enough supports in the game for any team variety or to even boost our characters properly. Because a lot of times, especially if you're like me and you're free to play and you actually didn't get lucky enough to summon Bronya, you're completely shafted on support characters because Asta isn't that good, right? Yukong is very hard to use or doesn't work with half the roster, but and her buff again is very restrictive. In most scenarios, you're only getting it every fourth turn. So in a lot of times inside of MOC, you can't get her buff properly, or you only get it like for one, go, right? You get one nuke shot. And so Yukong has her issues, even though she's still quite good. And then that leaves Tingyun and Bronya, who are the two best, right? That you would most people consider them the two best. And then what? We have Silverwolf and Pela, who are kind of equal. In a lot of cases, Pela's better, right? But it really depends on the matchup. And that's it. We don't have enough support characters to build any variety of teams, right? And I will say, shout out to any Kafka players. You guys are actually winning in this scenario because you can leave all of the good supports for your one team and then have all the DOT characters on the other team, right? So you're actually lucky in that regard if you summon for Kafka specifically, regardless of Kafka's other issues, right? That is one scenario where you actually have the benefit. But we have this huge problem is that I mentioned it slightly with Yukong, is that these supports don't even work well with most of the roster, right? Except for Tingyun, who's just completely broken, but that's a whole nother thing, and that could be a video in itself, that how big of a gap there is between Tingyun and like how she is essentially mandatory for half the DPS characters, right? That can be its own video. I don't really intend on going into that too deep in this video, but it is a huge issue overall with like the supports, because like what am I gonna do, right? Let's say I have Dan, right? I've got my Dan and my Jingliu. Well, guess what? I need supports. Oh, only one of them can get both Bronya and Tingyun. All right, let's fine. Let's give Bronya the Dan just because, right? Regardless of the skill point thing, let's give it the Dan. Well, then I have Pela. Awesome. Now, who else am I gonna bring? I could bring Yukong, but then that is an even bigger skill point issue. Okay, let's move it around. Let's put Yukong and Tingyun on Dan's team because I have, let's say, Dan E2, and I can actually abuse it and not run out of skill points. Fantastic. What does that leave Jingliu with? Pela and Bronya. Okay, let's say I'm a free-to-play. I don't have Bronya. What then? I'm going to use Asta, who doesn't really do anything except eat skill points and gives a low attack buffs because, let's say, I don't have her, high enough Eidolons to actually get all of her benefits. And the speed that she gives isn't really even that crazy. Well, I think you can start to see the problem is that we actually don't have enough support characters for all these DPSs, right? Blade, he benefits mostly from damage percent HP increase. Attack doesn't do much for him. Well, guess what? Defense down is pretty much just Silverwolf, Pela. Okay, we've got that. And then Harmony, well, we only have Tingyun who gives damage percent. The rest of them give attack. Yukong gives crit, but then her buff's also conditional. And then Bronya gives damage percent, which is great, and crit, which is perfect for Blade and what he wants, and turn advancements for, more follow-ups. But guess what? I try to build another team. I don't have the Harmony supports to build them, right? I think this is a pretty obvious issue. I don't think DPSs are all the problem. I just think we don't have enough support characters to actually boost our DPS characters to their peak potential, right? Because you can do this for all of the characters pretty much, Jingliu, you can argue she has her best supports. Well, I would actually argue she doesn't really. Obviously, Tingyun is insanely strong for basically everybody, but let's remove Tingyun. What does she really have? Well, she has Pela, right? Bronya is good with her, but again, you got to be careful about how you're eating stacks in certain rotations, right? Um, Outside of that, ain't got much else, you know? If we had someone who increased skill damage, right, specifically for her, fantastic, all right? What about Dan? Well, Dan would want someone that increases basic damage specifically because he doesn't do skills, right? He does primarily basic, right? Same with Blade. Like again, Blade doesn't really have that. Blade has a couple of supports with like Lynx who actually help boost his damage, but again, doesn't work for everybody. Let's take this to another character, Yang Qing. What does Yang Qing want? Well, Yang Qing wants uh, a bunch of attack, right? A bunch of crit damage because he's essentially getting guaranteed crits, and then he wants someone to draw aggro from him. Well, you're gonna bring a preservation character, right? Or someone to shield him so that he doesn't take HP, right? Anyone who trains HP doesn't work well with, Um, and he's also a hunt character, so he has to be a single target DPS, right? And if he's getting any, turn advancements, well, then guess what? That's eating up Yukong stacks, right? It's a character that wants to use the skill, so let's say you can't use the skill on any other character, so like Brony's in the team, you run out of skill points, you're kind of screwed, right? So I hope you guys can sort of see the problem is that we legitimately only have like 6 supports in the game, with 2 of them being 5 stars, but like only 4 of them are good. And if you don't have one of those 4, you don't have a full team pretty much because the whole game is centered around hyper carry comps, unless of course you're a Kafka player, right? Which that is the one case where you don't really have to have that. And so it creates this problems that we've gone all the way through 1.4 and even through 1.5 with like no new 5 star support character. We've got a couple 4 stars. There's Henya, who's about to come out, and there's Yukong, who, I said, is a very specific scenario, and so she suffers a little bit. And I just think it's absurd, right? This game is in a dire need of supports to actually boost our other characters up, to shake things up, to give people actual teams. Because right now, one of them you have to lose 50-50 on to summon for, and the other one has only come around once. So, for most people in the game, there's literally only like 4 supports that they can use, and they can't even get all of them because, again, it's all RNG, right? One of them, yeah, is guaranteed, but they ain't that good for most of the roster because their buff is turn restricted to ally turns, right? And so, again, it goes further than this. It's like Jing people are suffering for Jing Wang, right? He needs help, right? What does he need? Well, we'd like someone that boosts follow-up attacks, right? There's Topaz and Numbi, but their buff is single target, and so it's like, oh, do I want to run a dual DPS comp? Is it worth the damage loss? Oh, I still need to run Tingyun because with Jing Wang without Tingyun, he can't build stacks properly. He can't do his full damage. It's like, oh, well, that sucks. And it's like, on that same team, it's like, oh, do I want to trade any SP for using Topaz's skill, this and that. And so you get into another problem of not having the resources to boost certain characters because we don't have any supports, you know? Again, I don't think it's the DPSs. As I said in my power creep video, right, I don't think we're going to get power creep anytime soon for our current DPSs. I don't think there'll be anyone in recent times to outdo Jingliu or Dan Heng, right? Some people will try to say otherwise, but truly, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think we'll see that after 2.0. Like, it's going to be a while before we see any like big shakeup in the top DPS characters. And it's like, are they gonna buff? Are we gonna get any characters to buff those top DPS characters, right? To further boost them, to propel them into relevance, even longer, or it's like they boost their damage even more because that, right? Like, how does speed tuning affect this? Does it mess up your rotation, right? All this stuff, because this game has so much going into it. It's like there's a lot they can do with supports that they haven't done and that we do not have in the game. And I would like to see a lot of support characters going forward. It doesn't look like we'll be getting that for a while, though, because we're not getting any next update. We're just getting another sustain character, another DPS, and then I get Henya as a support, but like, if you know, you know, right? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We're in dire need of support characters. We're in dire need of, um, I guess 5-star supports really, and 4-star supports that aren't very specific to the setup, right? Um, Obviously, Kafka players eating well because they can actually have two teams, Kafka on one side and then a real DPS on the other side. Someone's gonna get me at the comments for that. They're gonna be like, "She's a real DPS," and all this stuff, and I'm just gonna hit them with the no, she's an enabler. Get right. Um, or something like that. That's gonna be so stupid. Guys, when I say this, when I joke about that, it like let me rephrase that. It is purely a joke, okay? I just jest in the whole like, oh, this character isn't, actually real or good, whatever. If you guys go on my streams, you'll see I'm pretty objective about all this stuff. But yeah, I want to know what you guys think. What do you think is the problem with teams in this game, or I guess the problem with the supports in this game? I could do, I mean, actually, I do want to talk about it a little bit. It's like why the supports don't work well with certain people. I'll end the video off with that. That I mentioned slightly already with Yukong and whatnot. But yeah, I want to know what you guys think of this in the comment section below. Tell me what your thoughts are on this whole like support thing that I'm bringing up, because I do think that is the real issue. It's not the DPS characters being boring, is that we don't have support characters to, mix any of this up, right? And yeah, sure, they can, put more variety in the DPSs, but not having supports means we have a real big team issue and that the teams aren't comfortable, right? And there are a lot of teams that can't even zero cycle because we don't have proper supports for them, or the buff just doesn't work for them entirely. So yeah, tell me what your thoughts are down below. In comment suggestions, I'll read all your comments. And yeah, I guess let's go on to the next topic that I'll round this off on. So support's not working with every character. Let's go into this real quickly. It's very simple. Because there's only like 4 real support characters. So yeah. Bronya. Bronya doesn't work well with turn advancement, not sorry, turn advancement characters and characters that their main damage isn't from the actual character, right? Let me explain. So, Dan Heng has turn advancement with his E2, right? Jingliu also has turn advancement with her transformation. Sasheng has turn advancement with her ultimate, right? And that's all off the top of my head, right? But why does this matter? Because Bronya's buff at E0 only lasts for 1 turn. So if you turn advance them, they do their special thing, the buff is gone. That second attack, or that third attack, or whatever, because of turn advancement, you're not getting the buff, right? This is different for Zila, though, because she gets an extra turn on kill, so she'll actually keep the buff because it's an extension. It's not a new turn, right? It's I know this sounds kind of weird, but that's how the game works. Free turns or extra turns are just an extension of that character's turn instead of it being a new turn. So it doesn't remove any buffs, right? It's the same thing with Yukong, that if you get a kill with Zila on Yukong, you can actually extend her buff to have Zila be buffed for all of her attacks for that for that rotation that you do. So that is pretty cool tech that you can do with that character specifically. But in the same vein, Jing Wong doesn't benefit fully from Bronya's skill because, well, guess what? She can't buff the Lightning Lord with the skill. So it kind of does whatever. You'll buff your basic, you'll buff your ultimate. That's great. But it doesn't buff the Lightning Lord. Granted, however, if you have E6, problem solved. It lasts for 2 turns, and now she works with everybody just fine, perfectly dandy. Should that be required to get E6 to make this character function for everyone, ideally? Probably not, but that is a really good Eidolon, let's be honest here. Allowing her to work with everybody on her skill, that's pretty dang good, I'd have to say. Um, Very powerful, right? Ultimate obviously works for everyone, so we can move on. Tingyun, the other best one. Exact same problem. Her buff is ally turns, or specifically the buff ally turns. So if you don't recast on Jing Wong specifically, or even Topaz actually, if you don't recast to keep the buff active every time that character has a turn, right? That because you'll have 3 dots, that third dot you gotta recast. If you don't do that, their follow-up attack will not get the buff. You know why? Because it's gone. Their turn is already gone. They've built their stacks. They've done whatever. No buff. it's gone. And so that comes into an issue with anyone who has specifically follow-up attacks are attacks that come outside of their attacking turn with Tingyun, and it's same problem with Bronya, right? It's like the same thing. To where the buff will fall off, and so they no longer have the attack buff, and then they do their unique attack with half the damage because you lost the Tingyun buff because you didn't recast, right? And that also becomes a skill point issue because Tingyun is no longer skill point positive in that team, right? You have to run her as either as skill point neutral, right? Um, and so, or it's either neutral or I think it can still be positive. It depends on the rotation and whatnot, because speed messes that up and how those characters work. But typically, it's like skill point neutral if you do that. So that's a thing. Pela is actually completely immune to this if you run her in the 2-turn ultimate setup. Obviously, her buff can fall off if the enemy does multiple turns, but then you can just like recast with the skill and then you get it back up. So Pela is actually kind of immune to this because she has like essentially permanent uptime on her buffs, which is fantastic for her. But yeah, she's like the only one who just flat out buffs everybody's damage because it's defense shred. Very powerful mechanic. So that's great. Continuing, Yukong, I already mentioned it. Hers is ally turns, and so if you don't have E6 and or if you mistime the buff, then guess what? No damage at all. That Lightning Lord, no damage. Numby, no damage, right? Her to our Himiko's follow-up attack, no damage because you mistimed it. You don't have 2 dots available, right? No buff, right? You use it, guess what? The support goes after you, Kong, because you didn't speed tune correctly. No buff, right? And so if you don't have E6, it's like nigh impossible to use her with certain characters. And if you do have E6, well, then you get a turn extension, or you can get better energy recharge for guaranteed buffing. But again, if you don't do it right, no buff. And that's because it's ally turns. And so that's the other problem with this character. Doesn't buff everyone equally. It's very inconsistent, and you gotta use her correctly. She works pretty good as a sub DPS in a specific team setup, but it's just how it works with this character. Asta, right? Similar scenario. At low Eidolons, her turn comes around, no stacks, no buff. It's completely gone. Her speed buff. Oh, guess what? I get speed for this one turn. Awesome. The next turn, boom, it's gone. You have to completely restart. Oh, hey, the enemy, they debuffed me with a speed decrease. Boom, gone. It's completely screwed over, right? Because it's not turn advancement. Again, she gives a lot of speed. She can give like over 60 speed to like the whole team. But it's just like her buff and how it works, while it is consistent, just like Pela's, it's not. Tell me if I'm saying their names right, actually, if you're still here. It can still go away when you don't want it to, and she's a skill point sink without the extra Eidolons, right? With the Eidolons, it helps her gain buffs, keep the buffs, energy recharge, defense. Like, it goes crazy with her Eidolons, right? But without it, you're kind of screwed, right? You can't keep it. Yes, it's a decent amount of attack if you actually do get enough stacks, but otherwise it's like, I can replace her with any character, right? And then lastly, I'm kind of making this go on a little long. I do apologize. I just think it's funny how these buff characters are kind of all over the place. Silver Wolf. Silver Wolf. I have no real complaints except for not having another tutorial light cone to have on both her and Pela. Silver Wolf without her tutorial light cone is kind of cringe and mid. You don't get consistent buff uptime, and that's really about it, honestly. It's kind of cringe, not gonna lie. But her buffs are pretty big, and she changes type element, which is cool. And depending on the team setup, that's really good or pointless. That skill is like here or there, but like generally Silverwolf doesn't really have the same issue because her buff is enemy turns, and so if you have a specific team where you freeze the enemy and slow them down, and then you imprison, so like certain teams, yeah, that her slowing enemies is actually really beneficial. Otherwise, it like doesn't really do much. So hers is like off and on, but not as problematic as the rest of them. So Yeah. I don't know. I think this is an interesting topic. As I said already, what do you guys think? Tell me down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Oh, actually, one more thing. Check me out on Twitch if you haven't. Um, yeah, that's it. That's it. And this game is Pog. All that. Blah blah blah. See ya.